Feeling overwhelmed, stressed, like life's moving too fast? Take a breath, take 5 minutes, and take stock of all you have to be grateful for. I'm Olivia, and I invite you to join me for 5 Minutes of Gratitude, the podcast that transforms your outlook in the time it takes to drink your morning coffee. Together, we'll explore the power of thankfulness. From life's big blessings to its smallest joys, we'll discover how gratitude can change everything. 5 Minutes of Gratitude, because a thankful heart is a happy heart. Follow 5 Minutes of Gratitude now, wherever you get your podcasts, and let's start our gratitude journey together.
Tired of doom scrolling? Time for a dose of awesome. 5 Good News Stories is your happy place, where underdogs become champions, crossing guards become legends, and impossible dreams come true. We're serving up 5 fresh reasons to believe in humanity. From world records to cute animal stories to that guy who turned his pizza shop into a homeless shelter. These are the stories that'll make you go, wait, what? That's amazing! Ready for your good news fix? Follow 5 Good News Stories wherever you get your podcasts, because let's face it, we could all use more awesome in our lives. The number 5 Good News Stories.
Calaroga Shark Media.
Nearly 5 decades later, the full truth of what happened on the morning of September 29th, 1978, remains shrouded in uncertainty. We can only reconstruct possibilities based on conflicting testimonies, changed stories, and the limited physical evidence that was preserved. This is one version of how events may have unfolded on that fateful morning when Pope John Paul I was discovered dead in his bed, just 33 days after his election. What follows is not a definitive account, but a careful examination of fragmentary and often contradictory evidence. This is White Smoke, Episode 6. The morning they found him. September 29th, 1978. A morning that began like any other in the Vatican, but one that would soon send shockwaves throughout the Catholic world and beyond. It was on this morning that Pope John Paul I was discovered dead in his bed, just 33 days after his election. The news broke with stunning abruptness. At approximately 7:15 in the morning, Vatican radio delivered a terse announcement that the Pope had been found dead in his bed with the light on, like someone who had been reading. This simple announcement raised more questions than it answered. Who really found the Pope's body? What was the exact time of death? Why was there no autopsy? And how did the Vatican handle those crucial first hours after the discovery? The official version of events would change multiple times in the days and weeks that followed, creating a web of inconsistencies that has never been fully resolved. Today we examine the events of that fateful morning in minute detail, separating documented fact from speculation and exploring how the handling of Pope John Paul I's death would fuel decades of controversy. The Vatican's account of how and when Pope John Paul I's body was discovered evolved in ways that raised questions. The first official announcement stated that the Pope had been found dead in his bed with the light on, like someone who had been reading. This initial statement omitted key details about who discovered the body. As more information emerged, it became clear that it was not the Pope's private secretary, Father John Magee, who first found the Pope, but rather Sister Vincenza Taffarel, one of the Venetian sisters who served in the papal household. According to later accounts, Sister Vincenza had brought coffee to the Pope's door at approximately 5:15 in the morning, as was her daily routine. When he did not respond to her knock, she entered and found him dead. She then alerted Father Magee and others. Some later sources speculated that the Pope may have died earlier, possibly around 4:30. Based on conflicting observations regarding the condition of the body and the development of rigor mortis. These discrepancies in timing may seem minor, but they became points of contention for those questioning the official narrative. Adding to the confusion was the question of the Pope's personal belongings. Some reports indicated that he was found with reading glasses on and papers in his hands. Others claimed the papers were scattered on the floor beside the bed. Still others mentioned a copy of The Imitation of Christ open on his nightstand. The Vatican never issued a definitive clarification about these details, allowing multiple versions to circulate simultaneously. What is known with certainty is that after Sister Vincenza discovered the body, she immediately alerted Father Maggi, who then called the Pope's other secretary, Father Diego Lorenzi. The Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Jean Villot, was then notified. It was Cardinal Villot who took charge of the situation in these crucial early hours. According to the limited information released by the Vatican, Cardinal Villot confirmed the Pope's death and then set in motion the official protocols for a papal death. He began overseeing the transition, including the handling of the Pope's personal effects, though the fisherman's ring is traditionally destroyed later as part of papal succession protocols. Reports indicate he also collected various papers from the Pope's room, including notes the pontiff had been working on the previous evening. The lack of transparency about what happened in those first hours has been a persistent source of controversy. The Vatican has never provided a complete inventory of the papers that may have been collected from the Pope's room. Nor has it offered a full explanation for why the initial announcements omitted Sister Vincenza's role in discovering the body. By the time the official announcement was made at 7:15, the scene of John Paul I's death had already been altered from its original state. The medical aspects of Pope John Paul I's death present perhaps the most troubling inconsistencies. The official cause of death was listed as sudden death, attributed to a myocardial infarction, a heart attack. This determination was made by Dr. Renato Buzzonetti, who arrived at the papal apartment after the Pope had already been dead for several hours. No autopsy was performed. Although there was no absolute ban, popes have historically not been autopsied, and the decision not to conduct one on John Paul I fueled speculation. Without an autopsy, there was no possibility of definitively establishing the cause of death. Instead, the medical conclusion was based solely on external examination and the Pope's medical history, which included low blood pressure and possible minor heart issues. The timing of the embalming process has also raised questions. Embalming was carried out much earlier than is typical, reportedly within 12 to 15 hours of the discovery, leading some to question why the process was rushed. In Catholic tradition, embalming is usually delayed out of respect for the body, yet in this case, the procedure began with unusual haste. Professor Cesare Guerin, a respected Italian forensic pathologist not connected to the Vatican, noted in an academic publication the following year that without a thorough autopsy, it would be impossible to rule out other potential causes of death, including the possibility that the Pope had taken medication that might have interacted badly with his existing health conditions. John Paul I was known to have been taking medication for low blood pressure, but the Vatican never released details about his precise medication regimen or whether he had been prescribed any new medications during his brief papacy. Another medical mystery involves the exact time of death. Rigor mortis typically begins to develop between 2 and 6 hours after death. According to some accounts, when the Pope's body was discovered at 5:15, rigor mortis had already begun to set in, suggesting he may have died much earlier in the night than the official timeline indicated. The Pope had last been seen alive at approximately 9 p.m. on September 28th, when he retired to his bedroom. If he died shortly after this time, it would contradict the Vatican's suggestion that he had been reading in bed shortly before his death in the early morning hours. Cardinal Villot announced that the time of death was approximately 11 p.m. the previous evening, but this determination was later changed to sometime between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Such a broad window reflects the absence of a proper forensic investigation and has contributed to the uncertainty surrounding the Pope's final hours. The Vatican's medical explanations have been further complicated by conflicting information about John Paul I's health immediately before his death. while some Vatican officials described him as being in poor health and overtired. Others, including those who had met with him on his final day, reported that he appeared to be in good spirits and reasonable health. Without an autopsy or comprehensive toxicology tests, these medical questions remain unanswerable, preserving the mystery around the exact circumstances of Pope John Paul I's death.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
The Vatican's handling of information in the hours and days following John Paul I's death has been characterized by inconsistencies, revisions, and a notable lack of transparency. The first press statement, issued by the Vatican Press Office at 7:15 a.m., contained limited information about the discovery. This was followed by several revised statements throughout the day, each providing slightly different details about the circumstances. By midday on September 29th, the Vatican was already facing skeptical questions from journalists. Why had the Pope's body been discovered by a nun, contrary to what many had initially understood? Why were there conflicting reports about the time of discovery? Why had items been removed from the Pope's room before a thorough documentation of the scene? The Vatican's responses to these questions were limited and often defensive. Officials emphasized the Pope's supposedly poor health, while dismissing questions about procedural irregularities in handling his death. Sister Vincenza, the nun who had actually discovered the Pope's body, never gave an official public statement about what she witnessed that morning. Her first-hand account of finding the Pope was never officially recorded, and she shared few details about the discovery until her death in 1983. She remained in service to the Vatican for several years before returning to her religious community, leaving many to wonder what she knew about that morning. Father Diego Lorenzi, one of the Pope's secretaries who was among the first to see the body, was reassigned to a parish in northern Italy in the months following the Pope's death. The other secretary, Father John Meiji, remained at the Vatican and would later serve Pope John Paul II, but he too shared few public details about that morning. Cardinal Vio, as Secretary of State, took control of the situation and the official response. He ordered the papal apartment sealed and oversaw the transition process. Reports suggest he managed the Pope's personal belongings, including papers that may have been present at the bedside. The exact nature and contents of any such documents have never been fully disclosed to the public. The speed with which the Vatican moved to return to normal operations was also unusual. The papal apartment was cleared out and renovated before the new Pope, John Paul II, moved in just weeks later. This eliminated any possibility of later investigation of the scene. By October 17th, less than 3 weeks after John Paul I's death, a new Pope had been elected, and the Vatican appeared eager to close the chapter on Albino Luciani's brief papacy. The strikingly limited information provided by the Vatican created an information vacuum that would soon be filled by speculation, rumor, and eventually conspiracy theories. The lack of transparency about even basic details, such as who found the body and at what time, undermined the credibility of the official explanation and raised suspicions that something was being concealed. News of Pope John Paul I's death shocked the world. Just 33 days earlier, this smiling, humble man had been presented to the faithful as the new leader of the Catholic Church. Now he was gone, with minimal explanation. The initial press coverage focused on the Vatican's announcement that the Pope had died of a heart attack. Major newspapers around the world ran headlines declaring that the smiling Pope had succumbed to natural causes after a brief reign. However, within days, journalists began to note discrepancies in the Vatican's account. Italian newspapers, particularly those with sources inside the Vatican, were the first to report that Sister Vincenza, not Father Maggi, had discovered the Pope's body. They also questioned the lack of an autopsy and the rushed embalming. London's Sunday Times published an investigative piece on October 8, 1978, highlighting the changing timeline and questioning whether proper protocols had been followed. The article noted that the Pope's personal physician had not been called to examine the body and that Cardinal Villot had taken control of the Pope's papers before any investigation could occur. By mid-October, as the conclave to elect a new Pope was underway, public skepticism about the official account had grown considerably. A poll in Italy showed that approximately 40% of respondents harboured doubts about the circumstances of John Paul I's death. This skepticism was fueled not only by the inconsistencies in the Vatican statements, but also by the Pope's own public image. John Paul I had appeared to be in reasonably good health during his public appearances. He was 65, relatively young for a pope, and while he had some minor health issues, there had been no public indication of serious heart problems. Moreover, his simple approach and perceived openness to reform had created both supporters and skeptics within the Vatican. Some reports suggest that John Paul I was interested in Vatican reform, though no official documents confirm specific plans that were imminent at the time of his death. The combination of these factors, inconsistent official statements, the absence of an autopsy, the Pope's relatively good health, and his reform agenda created fertile ground for alternative theories about his death. In the absence of transparent and comprehensive information from the Vatican, journalists, authors, and amateur investigators would spend the next several decades developing various theories about what really happened in the papal apartment on the night of September 28, 1978. The morning they found Pope John Paul I dead in his bed marked the beginning of one of the most enduring mysteries in modern Vatican history. The official account, that he died of a heart attack sometime during the night, may well be true. Yet the Vatican's handling of information in those crucial early hours and days created a legacy of doubt that persists to this day. The contradictions remain unresolved. Who really found the Pope's body? Was it at 4:30, 5:15, or 5:30? Why was Sister Vincenza's role initially omitted from official accounts? Why was no autopsy performed despite the unusual circumstances? What papers were in the Pope's room, and what did they contain? These questions might seem like mere details, but together they form a pattern of opacity that has fueled speculation about whether John Paul I died of natural causes, or whether something more sinister occurred. What is clear is that the Vatican's approach to managing information in 1978 reflected an institution unused to modern expectations of transparency. The assumption that the faithful would simply accept the official explanation without question proved incorrect in an era of investigative journalism and growing public skepticism toward authority. In the absence of definitive answers, the theories about John Paul I's death have multiplied over the decades, ranging from medical theories involving improper medication to elaborate conspiracy theories involving murder to prevent his planned reforms. The truth about what happened that September morning may never be fully known. The principals involved, Sister Vincenza, Father Maggi, Cardinal Villot, and others who were present in the papal apartments, have largely taken their knowledge to their graves. The physical evidence that might have resolved the medical questions was lost when no autopsy was performed and the body was hastily embalmed. What remains is a historical puzzle that highlights the tension between ancient Vatican traditions of secrecy and the modern world's demand for transparency. A tension that continues to shape the Catholic Church's relationship with the wider world today. In our next episode, God's Bankers, we will explore Pope John Paul I's planned reforms to Vatican finances, his concerns about the Vatican Bank's operations, and how financial motives factor into theories about his death. We will examine the roles of key figures in Vatican finance during this period and follow the money trail that some believe may lead to answers about the Pope's sudden death. This has been a production of Calaroga Shark Media, portions of which were made with the help of AI narration.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.